11-year-old screamed my
Listen up.
pilot father
We
and
have
mother not
incoming.
responding,
Prepare for
and saved
evasive
the
maneuvers
plane.
immediately.
In a small town near the airport, the
Cabin, we are
Thompson family was
experiencing some
preparing
light
for a
turbulence
flight
at
that
this
was
time. We
supposed to be
expect
like
to
any
be
other
leveled out
ordinary
shortly.
day. 11-year-old Ethan Thompson was buzzing with excitement. Flying was always an adventure for him, and today was special because he would be sitting in the cockpit with his parents, watching them navigate the skies. Ethan's father, Captain David Thompson, had been a pilot for over 15 years, and his mother, First Officer Laura Thompson, had shared the skies with him for nearly a decade. Flying was not just their job, it was their passion, a bond that brought them together and in a way shaped the life Ethan had grown up with. Ethan had always been fascinated by planes. From the moment he could walk, he would run to the airport with his little backpack, his eyes wide as he watched the jets take off and land. He knew the names of different planes, the sounds of the engines, and even the terminology pilots used. Today, however, he felt an extra spark of thrill. This was not just any flight. It was a routine trip, but for Ethan, being inside the cockpit was like entering a world he had only dreamed of. He ran his small fingers along the polished panels and the buttons, careful not to touch anything he wasn't supposed to. His parents smiled at him, amused and proud. They had taught him small things about flying, enough to keep him safe, and he had absorbed every word with a mix of curiosity and seriousness. The cockpit was filled with the low hum of instruments and the occasional crackle of the radio. Ethan sat in his little jump seat, buckled safely but fully alert. The plane was a mid-sized private jet, sleek and elegant, gliding on the runway as David completed his pre-flight checks. Laura was reviewing the flight plan, her voice calm, giving instructions to her husband and Ethan in a soft, reassuring tone. "Altimeter set, heading checked. We're all ready for takeoff," she said, her eyes flicking briefly to her son. Ethan nodded, his small chest swelling with pride. He felt a sense of importance, like he was part of something bigger than himself. His parents often told him that flying required attention, patience, and respect for every detail. Today, he wanted to prove that he could be responsible, even if just a little. As the plane began its roll down the runway, Ethan felt a gentle push against his back as the engines roared to life. The vibration tickled his legs, and a mix of excitement and nervousness danced in his stomach. His father glanced at him with a wink. "Remember, kiddo, keep your eyes open and your ears sharp," David said. Ethan nodded eagerly, trying to match his father's calm demeanor. For a moment, he forgot that this was just a routine flight, one that should be simple and uneventful. Everything seemed perfect: the sun, the sky, and the gentle hum of the engines. The world outside the cockpit was a blur of green fields, distant towns, and the winding rivers that shimmered like silver under the morning sun. Inside the cockpit, Ethan's mother explained the takeoff procedure in simple words, making sure her son could follow along without feeling overwhelmed. She talked about lift, speed, and angle, pointing to the instruments as she spoke. Ethan's eyes followed her every gesture, absorbing every detail with a mix of awe and concentration. He loved learning from his mother because she had a way of making even complex things seem simple. "See this, Ethan? This shows us how high we are. And this little needle tells us if we're climbing or descending too fast," Laura explained, her voice warm and patient. Ethan leaned forward, fascinated, and made small notes in his mind, imagining that one day he might actually be the one flying the plane. The climb was smooth, and the plane soared higher, leaving the town and the roads far below. Ethan pressed his face gently against the glass, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. The sensation was magical, almost like floating in a dream. His parents continued their usual routine, communicating with air traffic control, checking instruments, and adjusting the plane's settings. Ethan felt safe and secure, knowing they were in control. But at the same time, he felt a quiet sense of excitement, as if he were witnessing a secret world that very few people ever got to see. The hum of the engines, the subtle vibrations, and the endless blue above made him feel small and yet incredibly alive. As the flight progressed, Ethan's father decided to show him a few small maneuvers, gentle turns, and slight altitude changes, carefully guided by his mother's watchful eyes. Ethan's heart raced with joy. He imagined himself as a real pilot, steering the plane through the vast sky, feeling the power and responsibility in his hands. His father explained each movement in simple language, making sure Ethan understood the importance of precision and calmness. "Flying is about balance, Ethan," David said. "You have to stay calm even when things feel exciting or scary. The sky doesn't forgive panic." Ethan nodded solemnly, feeling that even at 11 he could grasp the gravity of what his father was saying. The cockpit was filled with a sense of harmony, a perfect balance between excitement and discipline. While the plane cruised steadily, Ethan noticed small details: the gentle tilts, the occasional bumps from turbulence, and the way his parents communicated without raising their voices. Every sound, every signal seemed like a small adventure. Ethan loved these moments, feeling connected to something bigger than himself. He watched his parents work in perfect synchronization, a dance of expertise and trust that made him feel both amazed and comforted. He thought about how lucky he was to have parents who not only shared their love for flying, but also allowed him to be part of their world. It was a day he would remember forever, filled with wonder, learning, and joy. Suddenly, as the plane reached a higher altitude, Ethan felt a moment of unusual quiet. The usual chatter of his parents had stopped, replaced by a stillness that felt strange. At first, he thought they were joking or pretending to be serious for fun. He looked at them closely. His father's hands rested on the controls, his eyes staring straight ahead, and his mother seemed unusually still, her face calm but different, almost frozen in concentration. Ethan tilted his head, a small frown appearing. He had seen enough flying with his parents to know that something was not quite right. The hum of the engines continued, but the human element, the warmth, the chatter, the reassurances, was missing. Ethan's mind raced. Was this part of a game? Were they testing him? He leaned forward slightly, trying to catch his father's eye, then his mother's, but there was no response. The initial excitement that had filled him at takeoff slowly shifted into a quiet unease. His instincts, honed by years of observation and curiosity, told him that something was wrong. He looked at the instruments, trying to remember the words his mother had taught him. Everything seemed normal technically, but the human signals, the small gestures, the spoken words were missing. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility pressing lightly on his small shoulders, a feeling both strange and intense for someone so young. The peaceful flight that had begun with joy and wonder now carried a subtle tension. Ethan's heart beat faster, but he reminded himself to stay calm. He thought about what his parents would want him to do. They had always emphasized observation, patience, and action when necessary. Ethan knew he had to pay attention, even if he did not fully understand the situation. The sun outside continued to shine. The clouds floated by lazily, and the instruments ticked along faithfully, indifferent to the subtle unease inside the cockpit. Ethan sat still, his small hands gripping the armrests, listening, watching, and preparing for whatever might come next. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with anticipation. Ethan's eyes flicked from panel to panel, noting the readings, the dials, and the gauges. He remembered small phrases his parents had repeated over the years, simple words that now felt like guidance for the future. Watch the instruments, stay aware. Think before you act. These words echoed in his mind, a gentle reminder that knowledge, attention, and calmness were powerful tools, even for someone as young as him. He tried to steady his breathing, keeping his mind focused, waiting, observing, and silently hoping that the quietness he felt was just a temporary pause, and not a signal of something serious. For the moment the plane sailed through the clear skies, a silver streak against the vast blue canvas. Ethan felt a strange mixture of awe and unease. The calmness of the morning, the beauty of the clouds, and the gentle warmth of the sun contrasted sharply with the odd stillness of his parents. He could not explain why, but he sensed that the adventure he had looked forward to might soon turn into a test of courage, focus, and quick thinking. The bond he shared with his parents, the lessons they had taught him, and the quiet determination inside him would soon be called upon in ways he had never imagined. And as Ethan watched the instruments and glanced at his parents once more, he felt a tiny spark of awareness, the feeling that he might have to step up, act, and face a challenge no child should ever face, but that, somehow, he was ready to meet. The sky above was vast, the plane steady, and the world waiting for what would come next. As the ordinary morning began its slow shift toward the extraordinary, Ethan's eyes darted back and forth, searching for any sign that his parents were aware of him. At first, he thought it might be a game or a joke. Sometimes his father liked to test him by pretending to be distracted or serious, and his mother would play along, laughing afterward. But this time felt different. The stillness in the cockpit was strange and heavy. His father's hands were steady on the controls, but his eyes seemed vacant. His mother's fingers rested lightly on the panel, unmoving. She didn't respond when Ethan spoke, not even a tiny twitch or smile. The feeling in Ethan's chest tightened. Something was very wrong. He leaned forward slightly, his small hands gripping the edges of his seat. "Dad, Mom," he called softly at first, then louder when no answer came. His voice trembled a little, the edge of fear creeping in. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, steady and unchanging, but the absence of his parents' familiar voices made the sound feel strange, almost ominous. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to push back panic. He remembered the words his father had repeated countless times. "Stay calm, think before you act, observe everything around you." He took a deep breath, his little chest rising and falling, trying to steady his nerves. He had to think clearly, he had to pay attention. Ethan scanned the cockpit, his eyes catching every detail. The instruments were all working as they should, the dials moving gently, the screens glowing softly. Everything seemed normal with the plane itself. But the human element, the warmth, the laughter, the little jokes that made flying feel safe was gone. Ethan's stomach twisted. He had never felt fear like this before, not even on the bumpiest flights. His mind raced. Could his parents be sick? Had something happened suddenly? His hands shook slightly as he considered the possibilities. At 11 years old, Ethan knew he was small, but he also knew that he had to act. He couldn't wait and hope for someone else to notice. He leaned closer to his father, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Dad." "Are you okay?" Ethan's voice cracked. There was still no response. Panic began to push at the edges of his mind, but he fought it back, focusing on what he could do. He remembered the small lessons his parents had taught him about the cockpit, about the instruments, about how planes moved through the sky. He didn't know everything, but he knew some things. He knew he could keep the plane steady if he needed to. And right now, Ethan realized with a shock, he might need to. The plane continued to glide through the sky, smooth and steady, almost as if it didn't know that danger was so close. Ethan's small hands hovered near the controls, not touching yet, but ready. He thought about what his father had said about steering, about adjusting altitude, about keeping calm in difficult situations. Ethan tried to stay calm, repeating the instructions in his mind like a quiet mantra. Keep steady, watch the instruments, don't panic. Think clearly. The mantra helped, but the fear in his stomach was still strong. His parents weren't responding, and for the first time, Ethan realized he was alone in the cockpit. He turned his attention to the radio, remembering how his mother had shown him the buttons. His fingers trembled, but he pushed them carefully, pressing the emergency frequency and repeating the words he had heard her use many times before. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Thompson Flight. My parents are not responding." The words felt strange coming out of his small mouth. He had said Mayday in play before, joking with his friends, but now the reality of the situation hit him. His voice was shaking, but he didn't stop. He had to call for help. Someone needed to know. Someone needed to guide him. The air traffic controller's voice came through, calm and professional, asking him what the problem was. Ethan explained quickly, stumbling over the words, but making sure to say that his parents were unresponsive. The controller's calm voice was a lifeline, a thread of hope in the tense sky. They guided Ethan step by step, giving instructions slowly and carefully. "Keep the plane steady. Do not touch the throttles yet. Look at the horizon." "Are you able to maintain altitude?" Ethan nodded, gripping the armrests, repeating their instructions to himself. He felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. This was terrifying, but he also felt a spark of pride. He was doing something extraordinary, something that even adults would struggle with. He could see the ground far below, the tiny towns and rivers stretching out, and he realized that he was responsible for every life on the plane. Minutes stretched like hours as Ethan followed the controller's instructions. He adjusted the plane gently, using what he remembered from his parents' lessons. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay steady. The controller's voice guided him, explaining slowly how to keep the plane level and how to communicate clearly. Ethan listened carefully, his mind working fast, repeating every step. He realized that even though he was only 11, he could make a difference. Every small action mattered. Every correct decision kept the plane moving safely through the sky. Fear was still there, but determination burned brighter. As he focused on the instruments and the radio, Ethan noticed small changes in his parents' condition. They were breathing, but very shallowly. His father's hands were still on the controls, rigid, while his mother seemed almost frozen. Ethan felt a chill run through him, but he didn't let it stop him. He leaned closer, speaking softly to them, trying to wake them up. "Dad, Mom, you have to be okay. You have to move." His voice was stronger now, more confident, fueled by the urgency of the moment. The plane continued to fly, stable but alone, with his tiny hands guiding it. He realized that he was not just a child watching events unfold. He was now an active participant in keeping everyone safe. Ethan's thoughts raced to the passengers on board. He hadn't noticed before, but now he realized they were looking to him, uncertain, anxious. The flight attendants tried to stay calm, but they were clearly worried. Some passengers were whispering, some holding hands tightly, some glancing out the windows, unsure of what to do. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility grow even more. He was not just protecting his parents, but everyone else on the plane. He had to stay steady, stay focused, and follow the instructions carefully. His parents had always taught him that fear could make people freeze, but courage was about acting despite fear. Ethan understood that now in a way he never had before. The plane encountered a slight patch of turbulence, and Ethan's heart leapt. The wings dipped gently, the engines hummed louder, and the plane rocked just a little. He gripped the armrests harder, his knuckles white, and followed the controller's instructions to keep the plane steady. Each movement, each adjustment mattered. He could not afford a mistake. He focused entirely on the instruments, ignoring the fear in his stomach and the tremble in his hands. Slowly, the plane leveled out again, and Ethan let out a small sigh of relief. He was doing it. He was really doing it. For a moment, he allowed himself a flicker of pride before turning his attention back to the task at hand. Hours, or maybe only minutes, passed in a tense blur. Ethan learned quickly, remembering snippets of advice from his parents, combining them with the guidance from the controller. He adjusted the plane gently, keeping it on course, listening carefully to every word. His parents remained unresponsive, but he could feel a strange sense of connection with them. They had trained him in small ways, teaching him to observe, to listen, to act when necessary. That training, those small lessons, were now the lifeline keeping everyone safe. Ethan realized that he was not alone. He had the knowledge of his parents and the support of professionals guiding him from the ground. As the plane continued its journey, Ethan noticed the first hints of exhaustion creeping in. His small body was tired, his arms ached from holding steady, and his mind felt heavy. But he pushed through. There was no other option. Every action mattered. Every small adjustment, every careful observation could make the difference between safety and disaster. He spoke softly to himself, repeating instructions, asking questions out loud when unsure, making sure he understood each step. He felt a strange mix of fear, determination, and pride. This was not just a test of skill, it was a test of courage, and Ethan knew he had to pass. Somewhere in the distance, the first signs of help appeared. Other pilots and planes communicated with the controller, offering guidance. Ethan listened intently, absorbing every word. He followed instructions carefully, making adjustments, keeping the plane level and preparing for the next steps. The turbulence continued, small bumps and vibrations reminding him that the sky was unpredictable, but Ethan remained focused. Fear was still present, but determination was stronger. He was 11 years old, and yet he had taken control of a situation most adults would struggle to handle. For the first time, he realized the incredible responsibility and capability within him. By the time the plane reached a position where an emergency landing could be arranged, Ethan had become surprisingly calm, his actions deliberate and steady. He communicated with the controller clearly, repeating instructions, confirming each step, and making small adjustments as needed. The passengers watched, some in awe, some with disbelief, as the young boy guided the plane through the sky with a courage beyond his years. Ethan's mind remained sharp, his small hands steady, and his heart determined. He was no longer just a child on a flight. He had become the protector of everyone on board, and he knew that he could not fail. As the plane began its approach to the nearest airport, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. The runway was in sight, the controllers guiding him carefully, and his parents remained alive, even if unresponsive. Ethan's small voice carried instructions, repeated phrases, and the occasional encouragement to himself and to his parents. He adjusted the controls gently, keeping the plane steady, careful not to rush, careful not to panic. The hours of observation, learning, and quiet preparation had all led to this moment. Ethan realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. And he was ready to take the final steps needed to bring everyone safely to the ground. Ethan's small hands were steady on the controls, though his heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. The plane was no longer just a machine. It was a responsibility resting on his young shoulders. His parents, still unresponsive, sat silently in their seats, the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. He knew that the time for observing was over. Every lesson they had taught him, every little tip about flying, every moment he had spent watching them work in the cockpit, it all mattered now. He had to take control, and he had to do it right. The controller's voice came clearly through the radio, calm and steady, guiding Ethan through each step. "Ethan, keep the plane level. Maintain your altitude. I'm going to guide you through the landing. Can you follow my instructions?" Ethan swallowed hard, nodding even though the controller couldn't see him. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice shaking slightly but filled with resolve. He focused on the instruments, adjusting the plane's position carefully as he repeated every instruction in his mind. This was no longer a practice or a game. It was real. Lives depended on him, including his own family. The plane approached the airport, and Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the runway stretching out below. He had watched his parents land planes many times before, but now he had to do it himself. The runway seemed smaller from his vantage point in the cockpit, and the gentle hum of the engines felt louder, almost like a drumbeat echoing in his chest. He remembered the controller's voice, slow and steady. "Take it easy. Small adjustments. Keep your hands firm but calm. You can do this." Ethan gripped the controls tightly, repeating each phrase to himself. He could feel every vibration, every subtle tilt, every change in wind. He was aware of the plane as if it were an extension of his own body, responding to his commands. His thoughts drifted briefly to his parents. He imagined them smiling, encouraging him silently, just as they had taught him when he was a little boy learning to pay attention to details. Ethan's determination grew. He could not let fear take over. He had to stay calm just as they had taught him. The controller gave another instruction: "Lower the landing gear, check your speed. Line up with the center of the runway." Ethan's small fingers worked carefully, pressing buttons and pulling levers exactly as he had seen his parents do. The landing gear descended with a smooth mechanical click, and he felt a small surge of pride. He was doing it. He was really doing it. The plane's descent began, and the winds shifted slightly, causing a gentle sway. Ethan adjusted the yoke, steering carefully, following the controller's voice with unwavering focus. Each correction had to be precise. Too much tilt and the plane could veer off course. Too little and they might overshoot the runway. Ethan's mind worked faster than ever before, calculating, observing, and reacting. His parents' lessons echoed in his mind, simple but vital instructions that now formed the foundation of every decision he made. "Small movements," he whispered to himself. "Calm hands, steady mind." Below, the runway grew larger, the markings becoming clearer. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline, but he forced himself to remain steady. He glanced at his parents once more, hoping for a sign that they were okay. They were alive, and that knowledge fueled him. He repeated another instruction from the controller: "Keep your approach steady. Don't rush, adjust the throttle gently." Ethan's hands moved carefully, adjusting the engines, feeling the plane respond smoothly. The vibrations in the cockpit reminded him of the immense power beneath him, a power he now commanded with care and focus. As the plane descended closer, Ethan felt a slight panic rising. What if he made a mistake? What if he didn't get it right? He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a brief moment, and then opened them, focusing on the horizon. He remembered watching his father land planes many times, seeing the calm, controlled movements. He mimicked those movements, small but deliberate, trusting his instincts and the guidance of the controller. The plane responded, gliding steadily toward the runway. Ethan felt his heart beat faster, but he stayed focused, repeating quietly, "I can do this. I must do this." The wind picked up slightly, causing a few bumps and shakes, and Ethan's small body tensed. He gripped the controls tighter, adjusting gently as instructed. Keep it steady, adjust slowly, the controller's voice reminded him. Ethan's eyes scanned the instruments, checking speed, altitude, and alignment. Every reading mattered. He felt the weight of responsibility more than ever before. He was not just a child on a plane. He was the pilot, guiding a flying machine full of lives towards safety. The realization was overwhelming, but he refused to let it paralyze him. Slowly, the runway grew larger in his vision, and the landing became imminent. Ethan's hands moved with increasing confidence, small adjustments guiding the plane closer to the ground. The controller's voice was calm but encouraging. "You're doing very well, Ethan. Just a little more. Keep your focus." "You're almost there." Ethan nodded, even though the controller could not see him, taking the reassurance like a small gift. He imagined his parents quietly guiding him, their lessons embedded in his mind. Each step, each adjustment brought him closer to success. The plane's wheels touched the runway gently at first, a soft thud vibrating through the cockpit. Ethan felt a mixture of relief and continued focus. "Keep it steady," he whispered to himself, adjusting the controls as the plane rolled along the runway. The vibrations and sounds of the wheels on the tarmac were intense, but he stayed calm, repeating the controller's guidance and his parents' teachings. Step by step, the plane slowed, each meter bringing them closer to a safe stop. The passengers on board were wide-eyed, some holding their hands over their mouths, some whispering prayers of relief. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes, but he did not falter. His mind was clear, his focus sharp. He followed every instruction, keeping the plane aligned, keeping the speed under control, making sure every movement was deliberate and careful. He felt his confidence grow with each passing second. He was guiding the plane, and he was doing it well. As the plane came to a complete stop, Ethan exhaled a long breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The runway stretched behind them, the sun casting long shadows on the tarmac. The passengers erupted in cheers and applause, and the controller's voice came through with praise and relief. Ethan smiled faintly, his hands still trembling slightly from the intensity of the experience. He had done it. He had guided the plane safely, despite the fear, despite the responsibility, despite being only 11 years old. Ethan turned to his parents, checking their faces with a mixture of hope and concern. They were alive, still pale and weak, but alive. Relief flooded through him, washing away the tension that had gripped him for so long. He reached for the controls, helping guide them to a final stop, making sure everything was secure. The cabin was filled with the quiet hum of the engines winding down, the passengers, whispers of admiration, and the steady rhythm of relief in Ethan's own chest. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to imagine what had just happened. He, a small child, had faced a situation that no child should ever have to face, and he had succeeded. He had stayed calm, observed carefully, and acted decisively. He had taken control, relied on the lessons from his parents, and trusted the guidance of professionals on the ground. In doing so, he had saved lives, including the lives of his own family. The realization was immense, almost too much for a young boy to comprehend fully. Emergency responders approached the plane quickly, checking his parents and the aircraft. Ethan watched from his small seat, exhausted but proud. His parents were being attended to, and the situation was stabilizing. The passengers began to disembark slowly, some reaching out to thank Ethan, some offering smiles of admiration. He smiled back faintly, feeling a strange mix of pride and humility. He had done something extraordinary, but he also felt the weight of the experience pressing gently on his shoulders. It was a day he would never forget. As the responders led his parents to safety, Ethan's mind wandered briefly. He thought about the lessons he had learned today. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Knowledge was powerful, even for a child. Calmness and focus could overcome panic. And the love and trust of a family could give someone strength beyond their years. Ethan had proven, to himself and to the world, that even an 11-year-old could rise to a challenge and make a difference. By the time the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the airport, Ethan sat quietly, letting the magnitude of the day sink in. He had faced fear, responsibility, and uncertainty, and he had come through with courage and determination. The plane, once a simple machine, had become a testament to his bravery, a reminder that sometimes extraordinary courage can come from the most unexpected places. After the plane came to a complete stop, Ethan sat quietly in the cockpit, his small hands still resting on the controls. The hum of the engines had died down, replaced by the gentle rush of wind outside and the low murmur of passengers moving around the cabin. For a moment, everything felt surreal. Ethan had just guided a plane full of lives safely to the ground, despite being only 11 years old. The weight of what he had accomplished began to sink in slowly, mingling with exhaustion, relief, and a faint surge of pride. He could hardly believe it himself. Emergency responders were moving quickly toward the aircraft, checking his parents and the plane with professional precision. Ethan watched as paramedics gently helped his father and mother from their seats, placing them onto stretchers. David and Laura were pale and weak, but alive. Ethan felt a wave of relief crash over him, and tears welled up in his eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the full impact of the fear he had carried in the cockpit and the overwhelming relief of seeing his parents safe. He whispered softly, "You're okay, you're okay." The passengers began to disembark, many of them walking slowly, still processing the extraordinary events they had witnessed. Some approached Ethan, their eyes wide with awe and gratitude. "You saved all of us," one woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can't believe how brave you were." Ethan nodded quietly, feeling shy but proud. He had done what he needed to do, guided by the lessons from his parents and the support of the controllers on the ground. Every word of praise felt like a gentle confirmation that he had acted correctly in a moment of unimaginable pressure. The media quickly arrived, as news of the heroic child pilot spread across the airport. Cameras flashed, microphones were held close, and reporters asked questions in rapid succession. Ethan stood quietly, answering in simple words, describing how he had followed his parents' instructions, listened to the controllers, and stayed calm to keep everyone safe. He did not brag or exaggerate. He simply explained what had happened, his voice steady despite the fatigue. The crowd of passengers, responders, and reporters listened in awe. It was hard to believe that someone so young had managed to navigate such a dangerous situation with courage and skill. Meanwhile, his parents were being taken to a nearby medical facility for evaluation. Doctors and nurses attended to them carefully, checking vital signs and ensuring that the sudden incident had not caused lasting harm. David and Laura, though weak, smiled at Ethan when they saw him from across the room. Their eyes were filled with gratitude, pride, and amazement. Ethan's heart swelled. He had feared the worst, but seeing his parents alive and safe brought an incredible sense of relief and joy. The family had faced a terrifying ordeal together, and despite the danger, they had emerged intact, thanks largely to the courage and quick thinking of their young son. As the day went on, the story of Ethan's heroism spread rapidly. People across the town, the region, and eventually the country wanted to hear about the 11-year-old who had saved a plane and its passengers. Interviews, articles, and social media posts shared his courage, emphasizing the bravery and focus he had demonstrated under extreme pressure. Ethan, for his part, remained humble. He spoke carefully about what had happened, often giving credit to his parents for the lessons they had taught him, and to the air traffic controllers who had guided him step by step. He wanted people to understand that courage was not just about a single person. It was about knowledge, preparation, and calm thinking under pressure. Back at the medical facility, Ethan's parents had regained enough strength to talk to him. They hugged him tightly, their voices choked with emotion. "Ethan," his father said, his voice shaking, "you were incredible. We are so proud of you. You saved all of us." His mother added softly, "You were brave, smart, and calm. You acted like a true pilot today, and you kept everyone safe. We couldn't be prouder." Ethan hugged them back, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and a lingering sense of awe at what had just happened. He realized that he had grown in ways he could not have imagined, facing a challenge far beyond his years and emerging stronger for it. The family was soon able to return home, where they were greeted by neighbors, friends, and relatives who had been following the news closely. The story of Ethan's heroism had inspired the entire community. Children looked up to him as a role model, and adults marveled at his courage and presence of mind. For Ethan, the experience was still sinking in. He replayed the events in his mind. From the moment he noticed his parents were unresponsive to the moment the plane touched down safely. He realized that every decision he had made, every step he had followed, had mattered. The experience had taught him a profound lesson. Even in the most terrifying moments, calm thinking, courage, and knowledge could make the difference between disaster and safety. In the days that followed, Ethan received letters, calls, and messages from people all over the world, praising his bravery. Schools invited him to speak about his experience, and aviation organizations reached out to acknowledge his courage and understanding of flying principles. Ethan, though still a child, began to understand that his story had touched many hearts. He spoke with humility, emphasizing that he had acted out of necessity, guided by his parents' teachings, and supported by the controllers who helped him along the way. For him, the most important thing was knowing that he had protected the people on the plane, including his own family. The Thompson family also began to process the emotional aftermath of the experience. For days, they talked about the flight, sharing their thoughts, fears, and relief. David and Laura expressed deep gratitude for Ethan's quick thinking, realizing that the small lessons they had given him over the years had equipped him for a moment they could never have predicted. Ethan, in turn, reflected on the experience with a mixture of pride and humility. He understood that courage was not just a single act. It was a combination of awareness, preparation, and the willingness to act when needed. The family bond had grown stronger, strengthened by the trust and love that had guided them through the ordeal. Ethan's story also had a profound impact on those who witnessed it. The passengers on the plane, initially filled with fear and uncertainty, spoke of their admiration for the young boy who had kept them safe. They described his calm demeanor, his clear focus, and the way he had followed instructions with precision and courage. Their words echoed the sentiment of many who had read about the event. Courage can be found in the most unexpected places, and even a child can rise to meet extraordinary challenges when guided by knowledge and care. In the weeks and months following the incident, Ethan continued his normal life, but with a quiet awareness of what he had accomplished. He returned to school, played with friends, and engaged in his usual hobbies, yet he carried with him a sense of maturity beyond his years. The experience had taught him to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly in difficult situations, and to trust his instincts. He had discovered a resilience and strength within himself that he had never fully realized before. For Ethan, the lessons from that day would remain with him for the rest of his life. The Thompson family also made a commitment to share their story, hoping to inspire others and teach important lessons about safety, responsibility, and courage. They visited schools and aviation programs, talking about the importance of observation, learning, and remaining calm under pressure. Ethan became an example of how knowledge, preparation, and courage could overcome fear, and how even a young person could make a life-saving difference in critical moments. The story served as a reminder that extraordinary acts often come from ordinary people who rise to the occasion when it matters most. Even as life gradually returned to normal, Ethan's experience remained a defining moment. He thought often of the flight, the fear, the responsibility, and the moment when he had guided the plane safely to the ground. He remembered the support of the air traffic controllers, the lessons from his parents, and the trust of the passengers. Each memory reinforced the idea that courage and calm thinking could change outcomes in the most critical situations. Ethan had faced an extraordinary challenge, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident in his own abilities. Years later, the story of Ethan Thompson would still be remembered as a remarkable example of bravery and quick thinking. Pilots, aviation enthusiasts, and everyday people would recount the tale of the 11-year-old who had taken control of a plane, guided it safely to the runway, and saved his family and fellow passengers. But for Ethan, the story was more personal. It was about the lessons he had learned, the courage he had discovered within himself, and the enduring bond with his parents. He had proven, in a way that only experience can teach, that even the youngest among us can rise to meet extraordinary challenges when guided by knowledge, love, and determination. The Thompson family never forgot that day, nor did they underestimate the incredible impact of Ethan's bravery. They celebrated his courage, but they also celebrated the unity and trust that had carried them through the crisis. For Ethan, the memory of the flight became a source of inspiration, a reminder that he could face difficult situations with calm, thoughtfulness, and courage. It was a story of survival, heroism, and the extraordinary strength that can be found within an ordinary child. As the sun set on that unforgettable day, the Thompson family sat together, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The plane, now safely on the ground, seemed almost symbolic of the journey they had endured, an adventure that had tested their courage, resilience, and trust in one another. Ethan, though still a child, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced fear, embraced responsibility, and acted with precision and bravery. And in doing so, he had not only saved lives, but also discovered a part of himself that would remain with him forever. The story of Ethan Thompson became more than just an event. It became a lesson in courage, calm thinking, and the power of preparation. It reminded everyone who heard it that even in moments of extreme danger, hope, skill, and determination could prevail. And for Ethan, the flight was not just a test of bravery. It was a defining moment that shaped the rest of his life, a story of courage that would inspire countless others for generations to come.